I'm Mary Kate Garden. I'm the chair of the Trinity Divinity Associates. And this evening is part of a series of events that we really began, an initiative we began last year in 2024. Um, we call it Church Outside the Walls. And it's a collaboration between the Divinity Alumni Associates and and the Faculty of Divinity, reimagining contemporary ministries. And what we want to do is just the idea is to promote a series of conversations online and in person. And this is our first event of 2025. Um, so I'd like to welcome you tonight. There's on behalf of all of those groups of Trinity and the Faculty of Divinity. A couple of housekeeping notes. You'll see you're all muted. We've done that just because we have a fair few people on our screens, and it's just a little easier and prevents some back feedback and that. If you want to ask questions, which we certainly encourage, we would suggest that you put them into the Q&A. There's a Q&A button on the bottom or wherever it is on your device. If you don't see that, if you put it into the chat, there'll be an opportunity at the end to ask questions, and please do. And in the meantime, I'm going to, in just a moment, I'll introduce you to Ali, who will be hosting, will be asking the questions, and will be welcoming Maggie Helwig, our guest for this evening. So before I do that, I will just remind us all that as we gather tonight from many places, we give thanks for the stewardship of these lands by the Indigenous people and the continuing presence here of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit from across Turtle Island. Now, as I just mentioned, Ali McIntosh will be yes, you can see, we'll be asking questions of Maggie. And Ali is one of the committee members on the Divinity Associates. She was born and raised in Toronto, like me, and she is currently the priest in charge at St. George on Yonge. And she is thrilled to be here tonight. She's thrilled to be part of the Divinity Associates and to be pastoring in her hometown. Ali, if you would.
Thanks, Mary Kate. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. And a huge thanks to Maggie for being here tonight. And I would like to just read you some important things about Maggie before we get started. So, Maggie Helwig is a writer, an activist, an advocate, and an Anglican priest. And because this is a Trinity event, we have to mention that she served as co-head of divinity during her studies and earned her Master of Divinity in 2011. She was ordained in the Anglican Church of Canada that same year. As an author, Maggie has written 4 novels and co-edited a number of anthologies of Canadian fiction and poetry. As an activist, Maggie has been involved in many social justice causes, advocating for those who lack the voice and the means to speak for themselves. In 2022, on behalf of the Church of St. Stephen in the Fields, Maggie filed an injunction request to prohibit the City of Toronto from removing a homeless encampment located alongside the church on City of Toronto property. The request was denied, and the encampment was partially removed by the city in 2023, but I believe remains at least partially in place still to this day, Maggie, yes. And it is this encampment that is the basis for her latest novel that we are going to talk about today. And,
It's not, excuse me, it's not a novel.
sorry,
It's not a
please,
novel. There is absolutely nothing
it is
fictional in this book.
not fictional, not at all. No, her latest work that we're going to talk about today. And this book was also shortlisted for the Toronto Book Prize, I believe. So congratulations for that, Maggie. Okay, welcome. And the first question I wanted to ask you is in reading your novel, not novel, I'm an English major, please forgive me. It's just my
It,
shorthand for speaking
it,
about
okay,
literature.
a novel is a book of fiction, though. This is
It is
not a
not
novel.
fictional. Please,
This is
please
not a
forgive me.
novel.
Please forgive me. In reading Encampment, I noticed that you wear a lot of different hats. One day you might be a food delivery driver on a bike. One day you are a social worker. One day you are navigating city administration and the legal system. And of course, you are called to preach and preside and to visit the sick. How did you approach writing this book while pulling all of those roles together?
Do you mean how did I have time to write the book while I'm doing such a lot of other things?
Well, I mean, I suppose that is
Um,
my question as well, but how did
right.
you choose which lens through which to share this story?
I don't think that I chose
Hmm.
I mean, I wrote it through the lens of myself. And
Right,
I'm a person who does a lot of things, but it's written. And I do think there is complexity and importance to writing this book as myself because I am not a person who is encamped or homeless. Um, I have not experienced homelessness and no more precarious housing than most people have experienced in their 20s. Um, so I am an outsider. I'm writing as an outsider, and there's a lot of danger in that. When the idea for the book was first proposed to me, because it wasn't my idea, um, I was quite hesitant because to write about this very marginalized, very misunderstood, very vulnerable world as an outsider risks all kinds of things. It risks being exploitative. It risks using other people's pain in order to write a cool book. It risks me being, the selfless church person helping out those unfortunate and really kind of smelly people. Um, it There were a lot of risks, and at the same time, as someone who has a facility with language and access to publishing and access to channels of communication, and as someone who has been given access to that world, who has been trusted with access, um, I had information which most people don't have. I knew a lot of things that most people don't know, and it seemed like perhaps it was my responsibility to try to bring this to a world that doesn't understand it. The only way I could do it with full integrity is to make it clear that it is my perspective. No one ever fully understands another person's experience. So I'm writing about what I have experienced in relationship with the people in the encampment. But I'm also very consciously and very deliberately incorporating into this story my own vulnerabilities, my own weaknesses, my own struggles. I've been diagnosed with 2 different major mental illnesses over the course of my life. I don't see any point in not being upfront about that. Um, like everybody else, I have a great deal of vulnerability and weakness and illness. I have many issues in my family that I struggle with. And I'm not different from any of the encamped people in the yard. I have been lucky in some respects. And that's really the only difference between us, is that I've had certain forms of luck.
Mm.
So I had to write it in a way that also made that as clear as I could make it, that it's not about me helping out some unfortunate people. It's about a lot of unfortunate people helping each other. And that I got emotional support in very difficult times in my life from the encampment. I have been significantly assisted in all kinds of ways by the people in the encampment. They're my friends, and there is, I hope, some mutuality there. I don't know if that was exactly what you were thinking of, but that's my answer about perspective, I guess.
That was a wonderful answer. And your authenticity and bringing of your whole self does shine through, or at least it did in my reading, and I really appreciated that. And what I think it's clear one of the themes of the book is community. And I wonder how this experience of ministering in this type of community has informed your understanding and perspective on the role of the priest and the parish in community.
I think when you choose to be the priest at St. Stephen's, you are consciously entering a space where there has been a very particular theology of the relationship of parish to community and the relationship of the priest to the community. And I think that anyone who tried to be the priest at St. Stephen's without understanding that would probably have a rough time. For a very long time, it has been a parish which has an explicit and profound belief that the role of the parish is to be there for the community, for whatever the community needs, to let the community define what it is that they need from the parish, and to do our best to be there to meet that need. And it has been strikingly successful. St. Stephen's has a role in the Kensington Market community, which is very, very unusual for an urban parish. It has a sense of centrality in the Kensington community. I've described it as sort of like living in the Middle Ages in a good way. To become the priest at St. Stephen's instantly gives you a role in Kensington Market. I didn't have to earn that role. I mean, I had to earn keeping it. But simply arriving as the priest of St. Stephen's, you already have a community role. You can lose it, you can make mistakes, you can blow it up. But unlike most parishes, the community sees the priest at St. Stephen's as a role in the community, and a very specific role in meeting community need, and in particular, the needs of the most marginalized and most vulnerable people in the community, which has varied from generation to generation who that is, but this is our generation's version of what has been the St. Stephen's mission for some time.
Thank you. I wanted to ask you about some language you use in the book. And it's quite striking every time that you use it. It's the land of affliction versus the land of the well. Is that correct? And
I think, yeah, affliction or illness, I've used both. I took that language from Susan Sontag.
And can you elaborate on what you were saying about how communication is blocked between these two lands?
Yeah, I mean, Susan Sontag used the language in Cancer as metaphor to talk about citizenship in the realm of sickness and in the realm of the well. And it's obviously a fiction, because nobody really has citizenship in the land of the well in any lasting or permanent or meaningful way. Ultimately, we all end up in the realm of illness. But there's a lot of energy expended in trying to maintain the sense that one belongs to the kingdom of the well, or the land of the well. In a way, the entire ongoing project of the middle class in our society is trying to maintain this really quite embattled identity without admitting even to yourself that it's an embattled identity. People are very afraid to admit that we are all part of the realm of illness in one way or another, and people are fighting against that enough that they become very frightened by and very hostile to people who remind them of vulnerability, people who remind them of weakness. They're trying to block that out all the time, to fight away from that all the time. And I think a great deal of the hostility to unhoused people comes fundamentally from the fact that it reminds people about weakness and vulnerability. As Christians, we should be in a position, we should be able to find this much easier because we have a story and we have a theology and we have a tradition which actually valorizes weakness and foolishness and failure and explicitly tells us this is what God values. But we haven't been very good at that. Christians have wanted to be, successful and well and prosperous and all of these other things, and we've, twisted our theology around to try to fit into that. The language of affliction is one I borrowed from Simone Weil, and I use that often instead of illness to try to make it clear that I'm not just talking about a physical condition. I'm talking about an existential human condition.
Yeah, there's one part, and forgive me, I don't have the quote written down, but where you said that we were calling from the land of affliction, but the land of the well could not hear it, or something like that, and trying to communicate the reality of the scenario and the solutions that could be actually useful, but this other entity couldn't hear it. And that's also a theme.
I don't think I would have said couldn't. I think people choose not to.
Choose not. Thank you. And that's also a theme throughout your writing, is dealing with the powers and principalities. And towards the beginning of your book, you wrote, if there's one thing you would ask of the city, it would be more honesty. Would you be willing to share a little bit about your experience dealing with the city for us tonight, and how that informed your experience and shaped your experience?
I mean, the city is a very large and complex organism. So I don't have just one experience with the city. I have a multitude of different experiences with many different offices and individuals. And also, and this is something I say in the book, I need to put it, the city does appear in the book as the main antagonist, but that is because of a dynamic that was very deliberately created by the province. If we're going to understand our current situation, we need to track it back at least to the Mike Harris era. Perhaps earlier, but the Mike Harris era was a tremendously significant turning point. And one of the things that Harris did was download social services to the municipalities. He did that knowing that municipalities would not have the resources to do a good job. He did that knowing that municipal governments are the least resourced and the weakest branch of government, and he downloaded this absolutely essential stuff onto them and knew that it would take time for everything to fall apart. So when it did fall apart, people, because people have no historical frame of reference, would blame the city. The province would get off scot-free from the destruction of social services. by downloading it to the city, knowing that the city couldn't handle it. And that's what happens. People blame the city, and the province is continuing to underfund cities. The province is continuing to restrict the city of Toronto's ability to raise revenues. The province is hobbling the city of Toronto in all kinds of ways, and the feds are just going la-di-da-di-da, we don't really care. You know, the investment in social housing has been virtually nil, and the city of Toronto, for all that it has made mistakes, has built more housing in Toronto than any other level of government. And they are the smallest and the weakest level of government. So they become the antagonist because they are the people we deal with day to day. But when I said what I would ask from them is more honesty, I say that partly because I'm trying to reflect the fact that that they can't do very much. They are very limited in what they can do. They are put in a terrible situation, but they won't be honest about that. They persist in this sort of rhetoric of how the city's doing a fine job, everything's under control, everything's all right. And it's just all those hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people making bad personal choices. And everything's not all right, and it's structurally not all right, and it's not the city's fault that it's not all right, because the structures have not been created and held in place by the city primarily. But they need to admit that. And they won't, because they're afraid that they will be even more significantly punished by the higher levels of government.
Right.
So our experience with the city has been sometimes very difficult. There are some people who work for the city who I think have extraordinarily bad attitudes. And the city overall is really unable to wean itself away from this idea that you deal with encampments by just dispersing the people, who then just go to another park or another area, another encampment. People just move from encampment to encampment. And intellectually, the people at the city must know that, because it's obvious. And yet somehow they keep on clearing encampments and treating this like uprooting a patch of dandelions. And then, oh, some other patch of dandelions sprouts over there, damn. Not that they're just chasing the same group of people around and around and around the city and causing more trauma and more displacement and more loss. Like I say, intellectually, they must know that this is what they're doing, but they can't seem to come to grips with that. But there are also some very good people at the city. And I do mention that in my book as well. There are some city staff who have been really good and played really constructive roles.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And the other force that we come up against in your book is NIMBYism, and neighbors and residents who are resistant to the encampment. Could you tell us a bit about your experience with that?
I think I've been relatively lucky on that front because I am in Kensington Market. And there's never been any law in Kensington Market. Kensington Market is where the anarchists live and the punks live, and I lived there. I lived there during the crack wars in the 90s, and it's always been a really sketchy place. But we are dealing with gentrification here as well. Not primarily by people moving into Kensington Market and wanting to clean it up. There's a little bit of that, but I think there's also a great sense that it's a lost cause. Housing is being emptied out for Airbnbs and other kinds of short-term accommodation, and that's a big problem. But the people who have been really viciously complaining about the encampment and really driving some of the stress around the encampment tend to be people who live north of College. They live north of College Street. College is an incredible demographic dividing line. North of College Street, you are in a whole different world. You are in a cleaner, safer, richer, nicer world. And there are some people who live in that world, but they want a little bit of and they want to be in that nice, safe, clean world. Like there's people who live north of College who are wonderful people and not NIMBYs at all. But there are people who want that nice, safe, clean world, but they also want some of the sort of edgy sense of Kensington Market. And so, for instance, they send their kids to school at the private Montessori school, which moved into Kensington Market not that long ago. And then they get upset because their children are seeing public drug use, and their children are seeing visible homelessness, and their children are seeing people struggling with mental illness on the street. And like, you're sending your kid to a school in Kensington Market. That is your choice.
Right.
But that is where the bulk of the hostility has come from, that and business owners who primarily cater to the tourist trade. There is there's a real split in the Kensington Market business community between the businesses that have been there for a long time and are really a lot about the local people. Those businesses are being increasingly driven out. They're being priced out. The food stores, the clothing boutiques, they're under terrible pressure. They tend to be pretty supportive. But the bars and the kind of upscale travelers hostel, lot of hostility from that direction, because they are under the impression that the encampment and the safe injection site, which is nearby, are bringing drugs and crime into the market, which is an idea you could only get if you had not spent any time in Kensington Market previous to the existence of the encampment and the safe injection site. And that this is discouraging tourists because it's not nice. There's no question that social conditions in the market have deteriorated. There's much more homelessness. There is more violence. There is more public drug use. There's all of these things. But that's part of a much wider social deterioration and an increasing split between some few people who are very rich and a lot of people who are more and more and more poor all the time.
Yeah. Wow. I want to ask, and this is a hard question to ask one person, but are you hopeful about
No.
our ability? No,
No, I'm not.
hard stop, not hopeful.
You don't even have to finish that question for me. No, I'm not hopeful.
Okay, then can you tell us a little bit about why you're not hopeful about our housing crisis and what's going on?
I look around,
Mm-hmm.
like look around, read the news. We are in the middle of a social collapse, and nobody in power has the will to turn it around. We are barreling into a climate emergency which has the potential to actually wipe out human life on this planet, and nobody with power is even trying to turn it around. We are looking at a concentration of wealth in the hands of a few people at a level that has probably never been even approached before in human history, and nobody is trying to turn that around. We are seeing constantly increasing homelessness, poverty. We're seeing a situation that is getting worse and worse, and nobody with the power to change it is trying to change it. Nobody is even tinkering with it. I don't see any will on the part of anyone who has the ability to make any significant change, to make that change. So we are on a downward trajectory and nobody's trying to stop it. This is why I am so concerned about community. because I would like to survive,
Mm.
and I would like my daughter to survive. And the only way that any of us are going to survive, any of us who are just small, ordinary people, is if we learn to be community. Like really learn to rely on each other, really learn to help each other and to support each other. Um, I've I've said before, you know, my apocalypse plan is like I'm gonna go to the encampment and Pirate's gonna look out for me.
Love
I told Pirate that and he was like, "Oh yeah, I got your back."
that.
Because really the people in the encampment, they have survival skills. They have survival skills
Yeah.
beyond, way beyond any of us. I mean, they know how to live through the winter in Toronto in a tent. Um,
Wow.
and they know how to look after each other. It's a rough world, it's a difficult world, but it's a world with a lot of skill and a lot of caring too.
Oh. Well, Maggie, thank you for writing this important and beautiful book and for being willing to share with us and with many other groups and publications. I'm sure you're very busy this week and this month, probably doing a lot of interviews. And so we're very grateful you're here to take the time with us. I'm looking at the clock, and we probably should open to Q&A. Is that okay, Maggie?
Sure.
Okay, so Mary Kate, you had a question, and then
I
I'm,
do, but I see that Allison, there's a question in the
oh,
chat
Allison.
from Allison who uh, asks, what keeps you motivated? So I'll cede to Allison.
Good follow-up,
What
yeah.
keeps me motivated? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, as I said, I would like to survive. So that's part of it. And part of it is I just go day to day. I've always just gone day to day trying to do what was in front of me to do. Trying to meet the needs that come at me in the world, trying to do what seems appropriate to me to do in this day. And then in the next day, and then you just sort of keep going and keep doing that. And you know, there's little wins along the way. I reversed an overdose today. Somebody's alive who possibly might not have been if I hadn't come out of the church when I did. So you know, you just keep going and you do the next thing to hand, I guess. It's the best answer I've got.
Patricia Bays asks, how well do you feel you're prepared for this kind of ministry? What skills did you need to develop?
I think I was extremely well prepared, but not by my formal theological education. I mean, I came into this kind of ministry knowing what kind of ministry I was coming into and knowing that my life experience had given me the right skill set for it. So my preparation was growing up in a household where my parents worked in the prisons around Kingston and had quite deep, meaningful relationships with a lot of people in the prisons. So I got to know them and I got to know that world very early. And a lot of things were sort of demythologized and de-scarified for me very early. And I've spent a lot of my life just chatting with people on the street, getting to know them. I've run meal programs for a lot of my career in the church. I've been a political advocate for most of my life. So in terms of dealing with governments and bureaucrats, I developed all that kind of skill set. I've done a lot of first aid, done a lot of crisis stuff. So yeah, I think I came at it very well prepared, but it wasn't my formal theological education that prepared me. I see users comment, absolutely, this is not just a Toronto problem. I wrote about Toronto because Toronto happens to be where I have some expert knowledge, but it is absolutely, it is a problem everywhere. Not just across Canada, but really internationally. And yes, in small communities and in rural areas, absolutely, it is just as much of a problem as in Toronto.
And David asks, have other faith communities, Anglican or otherwise, provided support?
Well, the diocese has been very supportive. The bishops have visited the encampment a number of times. We're getting funding from FaithWorks for an encampment outreach worker. And the diocese paid some of our legal fees. Some other parishes have been supportive. St. Timothy's North Toronto they supported us financially for a number of years. And we certainly get, I mean, any time that we call for people to come and be a supportive presence in the encampment, people from other parishes come for sure. We haven't had a lot of relationships with non-Anglican communities in the neighborhood until recently, but the United Church just got a new minister who's got a big background in harms reduction. So we have much more of a relationship there than we used to have.
And then a similar question. Where do you think God is in this situation?
In the encampment. And I think there's a lot of people you don't really realize till you start to think about it how theologically resonant encampment is. How so much of scripture is meditating on the period that the children of Israel spent living in tents in the desert, and how this was what formed them as a people. Or that in the first chapter of John, what it literally says is the Word was made flesh and pitched a tent among us. So there's deep theological stuff going on here. And when I think about where God is, I think about my friend Ellie, who is not actually in the encampment. He's marginally housed. He's in a supportive, sort of semi-supportive rooming house. He has schizophrenia. He struggles with a lot of stuff, but if he has a cookie, he will break that cookie in half and give the other half to somebody else. Invariably, always. And that's God moving in that moment. And you know, the encampment residents who are watching each other, who are reversing overdoses, who are looking out for the most vulnerable people among them, you know, that's the presence of God there. And in the people who are willing to move into situations that are frightening for them and different for them. Our volunteers who have sometimes been exposed to stuff that's really new for them and can be very frightening, but they will move into it because they're really drawn into relationship with the people there. And all of that is where God is moving in this, I think.
Thank you. Matthew has a question about your use of humor in the book. He writes, for all the heavy subject matter, it's incredibly readable. Does humor balance all the heaviness, or does humor help to convey the tragedy and absurdity of the situation? Are you engaging with humor theologically in addition to stylistically?
I think for anybody who works in situations of extremity, Black humor is part of how you survive. And I think you will find that among any people who work in extreme situations. I developed my, you know, you gotta laugh because what else are you gonna do? I actually developed that when I was working in international human rights and working with like major human rights violations and atrocities and horrible stuff. And so I developed a really dark sense of humor, but that dark sense of humor is what part of what keeps you alive. It keeps you going. And also there is so much, especially once you start dealing with bureaucracies, there is so much that is just straight up absurd that if you got, again, if you don't laugh about it, your head will explode. It's, yeah, I was thinking today, my outreach worker and I, right after we had dealt with the overdose and the person was okay, in that moment there really is an impulse to like tell dark jokes and just laugh at stuff and just laugh at the nonsense of stuff, and that's just part of how you cope and how you move on. I don't think I'm consciously engaging with humor theologically. I'm sure that it could be done, but I'm not really thinking about it theologically. I'm just sort of thinking about it as like life is ridiculous. So you gotta laugh. You gotta laugh at it because what else are you gonna do?
Any other questions from the group?
Maybe just a comment. Also, Ali, I was just going to say it's also okay if people don't want to write into the chat if they hit the hands up button if you're more comfortable with that, and we can unmute people and just ask a question aloud. And since I have my mute off, I'm just going to ask that, Maggie. Um, uh, not to make you the person with all the answers, but one of the things you've stressed is that this is um, this is a problem of everywhere, of the small rural areas, of the big cities, of Toronto, of Kensington Market, of everybody's neighborhoods. What do you have words for those who are for the cities that are coming to that acknowledgement or coming to uh, uh, for lack of a better word, dealing with, approaching, trying to find solutions within their cities?
I don't, because I don't think that we can solve this at a city by city level.
Yeah.
I think this requires higher levels of government to make some huge changes.
Yeah.
I mean, something which would change the entire situation radically very fast is that pilot project in universal basic income that Kathleen Wynne started, and which, measurably made huge differences in people's lives. Just do that. Just do universal basic income across the province and watch how many things are fixed in 6 months.
Wow.
It would be hard in the sense that it would mean changing budgets and it might mean raising tax rates on some really rich people, and they might get all bent out of shape about that. But it's a really simple idea that could be applied really quickly, and it wouldn't solve every problem right away, but it would solve a lot of them really fast.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. Do you have words of help for individuals encountering mentally ill homeless people?
That's a difficult question to answer in a broad sense. I mean, by encountering, does that just mean seeing people who are clearly experiencing mental illness, or does it mean some kind of
Um,
Well,
Carolyn,
I'm-
did you want to? I'll ask her to unmute here.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are afraid, and certainly I have encountered homeless people and spoken to them, and then seem to escalate their anxiety or something. I don't know, just not knowing how to say the right thing.
I don't think that anyone necessarily knows how to say the right thing, but something that always helps is saying, I'm sorry. It's like, I'm sorry if I said something that upset you.
Yeah.
That kind of very basic, simple human
Okay, I
honesty.
think that's indeed how I got out of it, but it just seemed to be a conversation that, I don't know, I'd say something like, that's too bad or something, and then, yes, it really is, or, I don't know. It was
Oh,
just,
well, then, I mean, that yes, it really is actually that person, like, they're connecting with you.
mm,
I think don't get involved in conversations that you don't feel you're equipped to have. But also understand that people are not frightening and they don't want them, they don't want to hurt you.
I think a lot
They
of,
may follow different social rules. You may have to adjust to a different set of social rules.
Mhm.
But we often react to people as if they're dangerous just because they're different and we don't understand, but it doesn't mean there's actual danger.
Okay. I guess a lot of us aren't really sure when or if there will be danger, and I really feel if,
Much less often than you think.
okay,
If somebody tries to hit you, that's probably a dangerous situation. If somebody raises their voice, it's not. I don't come from a good middle class background, so I raise my voice in conversation often, and I get in a lot of trouble for that. And I get told that I'm endangering people, making people feel endangered because I raise my voice, because I express anger when I'm angry. And maybe that's one. I'm very comfortable in the world of encampments because
people are
it
angry
is a
and
different set of
understand
social
it.
rules. It's a different set of social rules.
Okay.
But most people with mental illness are far more likely to be victims of violence than to inflict violence. Massively more likely. It's just a different. There's just, like I say, different social rules and things that may take accommodation or getting used to. But also nobody's obliged to have a conversation that they don't feel equipped to have.
I guess so many of us just feel afraid, and I think it could be comforting to many people just to have a conversation, and we don't initiate it for sure because of that fear. Anyway, I should let someone else get a question in.
Thanks, Carolyn. We do have one from the Q&A. You suggested that hope will only be found if we can really learn how to be a community. What are some practical ways we can work together to be part of that community and support it?
I can't answer that question for other people because you have to build where you are. Everyone has to build where they are. And where I am is in this little church in Kensington Market with a bunch of people tenting in the front yard. maybe the theological part of this is being able to look at your context to say, where in my context is community needed? Where are the beginnings of community that can be fostered? What needs to happen? But it's all based in relationship. It's all based in building relationships with people who are around you, and maybe people who are different, people who are in some way vulnerable. It's just based on knowing and living into your place, whatever that place is. And in my first year at Trinity, we had to do this exercise in creating a rule of life for ourselves. And one of the things I realized was that a great deal of my identity is rooted in a particular little bit of West End downtown Toronto, Central West downtown Toronto, which I know really, really well. And that sitting and staying within that place was a part of my calling, a part of my vocation. But everybody has different places, and they're not always geographic places. So you need to, where are you? How do you build from where you are? I see there's been a hand up for a long time.
Yes, we have time for one more question, so I think we should go to Mariana, and then we'll close.
Stanley has freckles. Flat Stanley has freckles. Flat Stanley.
Marianne, yeah, great.
Yeah, thank you so much for this. I don't know if it'll follow on what you're saying, or maybe it's a bit diverting, but I fantasize, aside from what I would love to see government do, I dream about a world, cities where the citizens are more engaged, right? So for example, say there's kind of an environmental issue, we would know what to do if there's flooding, we would have some understanding of how to help each other, any kind of an emergency or social situation. And I see it the same way in this. So I don't know, sometimes I fantasizing about requiring all of us to take naloxone training or to have interactions with different people in our community. I mean, I don't mean an enforced situation, but more opportunities for, say, high school students to do that kind of thing, for anyone to do that kind of thing. I think that would break a lot of barriers. I don't know what you think about that. I mean, that's how I like to dream about, and then as through that, I would find that way for me. But yeah, just wanted to get your sense of that.
Yeah, I think we should all be doing a lot of practical survival training. I really do. I think everybody should examine what skills do you have that could help people to survive, help yourself and other people to survive in a crisis. What skills do you need to develop? Naloxone training is very easy to access, by the way. Any pharmacy will be able to tell you how to administer naloxone. And it is something which cannot do harm. If you give it to someone who is not actually experiencing an opiate overdose, it just won't do anything really. So that's easy, but think about your skills and think about who do you know who has skills that complement yours, and think about, in a crisis, who in your community is going to be vulnerable. Where are there people who have physical limitations or cognitive limitations who are going to need extra help in a crisis? Who's going to be there for them? Do you know them? Do you know them well enough to help them out? Like, we all need to be thinking about these things, because floods and fires and wars and rumors of wars, there's going to be more and more, and we will need to know how to respond. I was intimidated and also touched to discover that I have a whole group of young parishioners and volunteers who've set up their own WhatsApp group called the St. Stephen's Syndicate, and they chat on that group all the time. And apparently their emergency plan for any kind of serious crisis or breakdown is get to the church. Just everybody get to the church and we'll figure it out from there.
Oh, that's
And,
wonderful. I
and
said one more
yeah, I mean,
question.
that's the role the church should be playing, you know? I feel like everybody's contingency plan should be get to the church. Everybody get to the church and we'll figure it out. And maybe that's a challenge for churches, is how do you become that center so that when the fire comes, when the flood comes, when the Civil War comes, when whatever comes, all the young people say, okay, we're going to get to the church and then we're going to figure out what to do next.
There's just one last question I think is a good ending spot for us, which is from Ed, which says, how has the encampment at St. Stephen's evolved, and does it have a particular personality?
Sorry, somebody's calling me repeatedly, so I need to take this call. I'm really sorry.
Okay, Mary Kate, over to you.
All right. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Ali, and I'll thank Maggie too when she comes back, but for leading the questions. But thank you to all of you. There's 50, more than 50 screens have been opened. You've sat through this for the evening, you've been engaged, and I know we all have busy things, but clearly this is an important conversation, an important subject. So we're absolutely delighted that you could be with us tonight. So I thank you on behalf.
I'm so sorry. I'm
Oh,
so
that's
sorry
okay.
about that. And I'm sorry to Ed about running out on his question.
Oh, if it's good, I was just saying thank you. I hadn't thanked you, Maggie, but if you have a wee moment for Ed's question, he's just, as Ali said, I think he was asking how it had evolved, as perhaps since you'd written or more in recent days, and the personality of the
I feel
encampment.
like that could be a very long answer.
It could be, yeah.
Because it has changed it's changed, it's gone up and down, it's been different sizes, and different personalities in some ways too over the period of time. So it's been 4 years now. That there's been an unidentifiable encampment there, and I think it's been through many different phases.
Yeah.
I mean, the book deals fairly comprehensively with the first, 2.5 years.
Yeah.
But it's continued to change and evolve since then. I don't think I could answer that question in a short period of time. So
That's excellent. Well, thank you for that. And
sorry.
Maggie, we thank you very much. We know the pressures, there are a lot of things pulling at you, a lot of pressures. It's there's a lot going on at St. Stephen's every day. As you said, you'd come from trying to help somebody who'd overdosed, and that this is an ongoing thing. And we keep you in our prayers, and maybe we can take those prayers on those support that's clearly in these on these screens for you, and put word to deed in our own communities and build up relationships. I have a note that from that we always say that this is a free event, and we encourage people to make a donation for the student fund. But I'm also going to encourage everybody to go out and get an naloxone kit. If you don't have one, get yourself to your nearest drugstore, whatever kind, as Maggie says, and you may carry it around for a long time. And please God, never use it, but if you need it, it doesn't take very many minutes they'll run you through, and after that they'll replace them when they expire, or if you have to use it. So it's a small thing, but I think as Maggie has so eloquently written and demonstrated and reiterated tonight, it's the small things that building to community and building to relationship. Thank you all very, very much for coming, Maggie. Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and God bless you all. And we'll look forward to watch your emails. There'll be a survey about this, and you can always contact the college if you have any other further questions or comments. And thank you very, very much, all of you.